Have you ever wondered why the moments you try hardest to appear perfect are the very moments he drifts away? What you think pushes him closer, smooth words, a constant smile, often builds an invisible wall instead. Most people believe desire is born from sweetness and ease, but the truth is far more paradoxical. The spark is often lit by the shadows you hide. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious, especially the shadow self, is a gateway to authentic connection, and today that insight matters more than ever. In the quiet chambers of the psyche, the feminine shadow carries secrets older than memory. She is the part of you that refuses to be domesticated, that hums with instinct and mystery. Men sense her even when you never speak her name. It is not the flawless surface that compels them, it is the subtle flicker of something untamed beneath. He may not understand why a glance lingers or why his pulse quickens when you walk away, but his soul recognizes what his mind cannot name. The hidden draws him like a tide, because every man carries his own shadow that longs to meet its mirror. Imagine the evening air heavy with unspoken tension. You move through a room with quiet certainty, not demanding attention but vibrating with it. You do not explain your thoughts. You do not rush to fill silence. In that stillness, he feels the wildness you do not display. It is the echo of an ancient dance, Eros meeting the unknown. This is not a performance. It is the honest presence of the self you usually keep locked away, the fierce, the vulnerable, the unpredictable. Desire begins where predictability ends. Jung taught that what we repress does not vanish, it waits. Your repressed emotions, anger, sensuality, ambition, even the capacity for distance, are not flaws to erase. They are the missing colors of your aura. When you allow them to breathe, you embody a wholeness that defies explanation. You become the paradox of warmth and storm, invitation and challenge. A man who encounters this completeness feels both captivated and confronted, for you awaken the forgotten depths of his own being. It is not manipulation, it is resonance. Perhaps you have felt it already, the shift when you stop chasing and simply stand in your own gravity. A subtle gesture, holding eye contact a heartbeat longer, letting a sly half-smile appear, carries more power than 100 declarations. In that pause he senses a woman who is not seeking permission to exist. This unspoken strength ignites his unconscious desire, not because you are playing a game, but because you embody what his spirit longs to reconcile, mystery with presence, darkness with light. Consider the archetype of the enchantress, not as a seductress of trickery but as the embodiment of deep feminine knowing. She does not beg to be seen, she allows herself to be felt. Her shadow is not a threat but a promise, that love can include the unknown, that passion can live alongside quiet independence. When you touch this energy, you are not performing for him, you are becoming yourself. That is the first irresistible trigger, the magnetic force of authenticity rooted in the shadow. The journey begins with the courage to stop hiding from your own depths. The more you claim the parts of you once labeled too much, too dark, too wild, the more natural magnetism flows. He may not have words for it, but he will feel it as a pull that defies logic. And in that moment, desire ceases to be a game of pursuit. It becomes a meeting of souls. The second shadow trigger unfurls in the art of deliberate absence, a silence that speaks more eloquently than any confession. When a woman steps back, not in retreat but in chosen stillness, she awakens a primal recognition within a man. He senses space where once there was certainty, and in that space, his imagination begins to move. The human mind, Jung observed, fills voids with archetype and projection. A single evening without a message, a quiet withdrawal from the constant stream of reassurance, becomes a canvas on which his own unconscious paints vivid colors of longing and pursuit. Absence is not coldness, it is the echo of self-possession. It is the refusal to collapse your world around another person's attention. When you resist the impulse to explain every mood, when you allow silence to stretch like a dark velvet corridor, you create an opening where his own shadow emerges. He starts to wonder, to reach, to confront feelings he did not expect. Desire, in its most elemental form, thrives in mystery, and mystery is born where words once lived. This is not a strategy of manipulation but a declaration of sovereignty. Your life is full, your heart is not a cage waiting to be unlocked. Picture the moment when you do not answer immediately. Hours pass and you remain immersed in your own pursuits, reading, painting, walking through the city with the evening wind curling against your skin. He senses it, even without knowing what you do. Something within him stirs, an unfamiliar urgency, a sudden curiosity about the layers he has not yet touched. The pause becomes a mirror, showing him not only his desire but his fear of losing what he does not yet possess. The tension sharpens every thought of you. Jung believed that relationships awaken the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects within each soul. When you embody absence without resentment, you invite his inner feminine to awaken. He feels the tug of yearning not as a chase for conquest but as a call to integration. He is drawn toward you not because you withhold affection, but because your self-contained quiet reminds him of what he seeks within himself, the union of independence and intimacy. Your silence becomes a teaching, a wordless initiation. The modern world fears quiet. Constant notifications promise relevance, and many rush to answer before a moment of stillness can settle. Yet it is precisely in this refusal to fill every gap that the second shadow trigger lives. A woman who can disappear into her own world without apology is a woman who commands respect on a level deeper than admiration. She moves like the moon, present even when unseen, shaping tides from afar. He feels her gravity, subtle and inexorable. When you next consider reaching for the phone to prove your presence, pause instead. Let the evening stretch. Allow him to experience the slight ache of distance. That ache is not cruelty, it is the natural pulse of desire. Within it, he begins to recognize your depth, to sense that your essence cannot be captured by constant contact. You become a mystery he must approach with reverence, not a certainty he can take for granted. This deliberate absence is the second irresistible shadow trigger. It is the embodiment of quiet strength, the gentle yet unyielding statement that you are whole with or without his gaze. And as he confronts the silence, he discovers that his longing is not just for your presence but for the vastness you represent. In that recognition, attraction deepens into something raw, something almost sacred. The third shadow trigger rises in the realm of unapologetic desire, the flame that burns without seeking permission. This is not the hunger that begs to be fed, but the inner fire of a woman who owns her passions, sensual, creative, intellectual, without softening them to make others comfortable. Jung saw the shadow as the crucible where raw instinct lives, a place where the sacred and the primal intertwine. When a woman allows that fire to show, she calls a man's own instinct to life. It is not about overt seduction, it is the quiet certainty of a body and soul unashamed of wanting. Consider the way desire moves through you when you do not suppress it. The gleam in the eye when speaking of a dream you refuse to abandon, the slow breath when music floods a room, the way your skin warms at the thought of an untamed future. These are not performances. They are signals of vitality, the undeniable evidence that you are fully alive. A man feels this vitality before he can name it. It stirs something ancient in him, the part that longs to witness, to match, to protect, not to own, but to meet. In a world that often rewards restraint, a woman's open embrace of her own longing becomes an act of quiet rebellion. It is a rebellion that needs no audience. You do not need to shout or display, your very presence becomes charged with a subtle electricity. Whether your desire flows toward art, toward the world itself, or toward the intimate brush of another's hand, it is the authenticity of the wanting that magnetizes. He senses the difference between a performance and a truth, and it is the truth that draws him closer. Picture an evening where conversation drifts toward dreams and you speak with unguarded fervor. Your words are not careful, they are alive, pulsing with the rhythm of something larger than hope. He leans in, not only because of what you say, but because of the unmistakable current beneath your voice. This current is your shadow unmasked, the convergence of instinct and spirit, a force that refuses to be muted. Desire of this nature is not reckless, it is holy in its honesty. Jung taught that acknowledging desire is a step toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. When you honor your own appetite for life, you no longer outsource passion to another. You invite a man to witness, to share, but not to complete. He feels the weight of that invitation and the liberation within it. To stand near such fire requires him to awaken his own depths. Attraction becomes more than chemistry, it becomes a call to consciousness. Many fear that revealing such longing will make them vulnerable to rejection. Yet the paradox is that suppressed desire speaks louder than the words you try to hide. When you disown the fire, it becomes restlessness, resentment, an unspoken plea. When you embrace it, it becomes light, guiding, magnetic, undeniable. The third shadow trigger is this fearless embrace, the soft yet unyielding declaration that you are a being of flesh and spirit, worthy of every sensation this life can offer. In that moment of unapologetic desire, you cease to chase and begin to radiate. He does not approach out of conquest but out of recognition, sensing in you the mirror of his own hidden longing. And as he draws nearer, it is not possession he seeks, but the shared ignition of two souls unafraid to burn. The fourth shadow trigger emerges in the quiet authority of boundaries that do not bend. It is the energy of a woman who knows precisely where she begins and where another ends, and who defends that sacred line with both gentleness and steel. Jung understood that individuation, the journey toward wholeness, requires this separation. Without it, the self dissolves into the other, and desire withers into dependency. Yet when a woman stands firm in her own ground, she awakens in a man the urge to rise, to meet her as an equal, to earn the privilege of her presence. Boundaries are not walls, they are living membranes. They breathe, they flex, but they do not break. When you decline an invitation that does not honor your spirit, when you speak a clear no without apology, when you choose solitude over shallow company, you declare a truth more alluring than any act of seduction, that your life is not a prize to be taken, but a realm to be respected. A man feels the weight of this integrity. It calls forth the part of him that yearns for challenge, the part that desires a partner rather than a possession. Imagine the moment when he tests the edge of your resolve, perhaps unconsciously, perhaps with a careless word. Instead of shrinking or explaining, you meet his gaze with quiet steadiness. Your silence is not cold, it is luminous with self-knowledge. In that instant, he perceives a strength that cannot be swayed by charm or urgency. This strength does not repel him, it draws him closer, because it assures him that your affection, when given, is chosen, not surrendered. He begins to understand that love without boundaries is not love at all, and that only a woman who guards her own depths can truly invite him in. The shadow aspect of boundaries carries a paradoxical beauty. It demands that you face your own fear of abandonment, the old belief that saying no will drive someone away. Yet by confronting that fear, you embody the very force that keeps desire alive. A man who encounters such fearless sovereignty cannot remain in the shallow end of connection. Your presence becomes a mirror to his own limitations, challenging him to honor both your independence and his own. In a culture that often confuses availability with affection, firm boundaries are radical. They signal that you will not barter your essence for fleeting attention. This refusal is magnetic. It tells him, without a word, that your heart is a sanctuary, and entry requires reverence. He may feel a flicker of frustration, even resistance, but beneath it stirs admiration and a deeper pull, the need to meet you on the sacred ground of mutual respect. Consider the subtle gestures that embody this power. The graceful withdrawal of your hand when a conversation turns careless. The calm declaration that your time is not to be wasted. The choice to walk away from anything that diminishes your light. Each act speaks louder than 1,000 explanations. These are not ultimatums, they are the natural expressions of a soul that refuses to be divided. The fourth shadow trigger, then, is the unwavering boundary, an invisible crown that signals your self-worth. It does not shout. It simply exists, an unspoken law that reshapes the space around you. A man who stands before such sovereignty feels both the challenge and the invitation. He is drawn not to break the boundary, but to prove worthy of standing beside it. And in that proving, desire deepens, sharpened by the knowledge that what is freely given is infinitely more precious than what is easily taken. The fifth shadow trigger lives in the rare alchemy of vulnerability and power intertwined, a presence that reveals the heart without surrendering the soul. It is the moment when a woman allows her authentic feeling to surface, not as a plea for rescue, but as a declaration of humanity. Jung believed the shadow contains both the wounds and the medicine. When you face those hidden truths with unflinching eyes, you become luminous. A man who encounters this radiance senses a paradox he cannot resist: strength that bends but never breaks, softness that invites yet never begs. Picture the stillness after a storm. You have spoken your truth, perhaps about a past hurt, a dream deferred, a fear of the unknown, and then you fall silent, not seeking reassurance. The room itself seems to breathe differently. He feels the weight of your courage, the quiet heartbeat of someone who will not hide behind perfection. In that silence his own guarded places begin to stir. Attraction born of mere beauty fades quickly, attraction born of shared humanity roots itself deep. This vulnerability is not a confession for its own sake. It is the act of standing unmasked, allowing the complexity of your being, light and shadow, to be seen. You do not offer it to everyone. You choose the moment, the person, the space. That choice is power. It tells him you are capable of intimacy without dependence, of revelation without collapse. He feels the gravity of that choice and understands that your openness is a gift, not a demand. When you reveal a fragment of your inner landscape, you invite him into his own. His defenses soften. The masculine shadow, often armored by pride, begins to thaw in the presence of such fearless honesty. He senses that desire is not only about the body, but about the courage to meet another soul in its full complexity. The connection becomes electric because it is real, woven from threads of truth instead of masks. In this space, even your quiet tears or a tremor in your voice become magnetic. They are not signs of weakness but of immense strength, the strength to feel. The modern world often mistakes vulnerability for fragility, but Jung understood it as a bridge to the unconscious, a meeting place where transformation begins. When you embody this duality, you are neither victim nor untouchable goddess. You are fully alive, and that aliveness calls him to rise beyond the ordinary. Notice how this differs from oversharing or emotional chaos. True vulnerability is measured, intentional. You reveal enough to be known, never enough to be consumed. It is the delicate dance of openness and autonomy. Your eyes might glisten as you speak of a childhood dream or an old scar, but your spine remains straight, your presence unbroken. He witnesses a woman who can hold both pain and dignity, and he cannot look away. This final shadow trigger completes the circle. It is the embodiment of wholeness, passion without desperation, independence without isolation, tenderness without fear. Through the journey of these 5 triggers, you have moved from magnetic authenticity, to the power of absence, to unapologetic desire, to the sacred boundary, and finally to this luminous vulnerability. Each has drawn him not by strategy but by resonance, awakening in him the same depths you have embraced within yourself. And now comes the quiet culmination. Desire that began as a spark becomes a steady flame, yet you are no longer defined by whether he stays or goes. You stand in the center of your own being, radiant and complete. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.